Welcome to the Terror Time.
First story is about the Midnight Cult. In the remote town of Black Hollow, Halloween night was never just about costumes and candy. The town had a dark past, steeped in terrifying legends of cult sacrifices that haunted the region's history. Every year, whispers of a secret cult grew louder, tales of their disfigured entity lurking in the woods seeking sacrifices for an ancient Halloween witch. You believed the stories, until the night when Ella discovered the truth. Ella was a paranormal investigator, part of the popular Twin Paranormal group. She had heard countless scary true stories, but the legends surrounding Black Hollow fascinated her the most. The cult that supposedly worshipped a grotesque, disfigured entity that demanded blood on Halloween had intrigued her for years. With Halloween night approaching, she decided it was time to uncover the truth once and for all. Plan was simple: enter the haunted woods and record any strange occurrences for her channel. With a playlist of spooky Halloween music playing softly in her ear and the sounds of distant Halloween games echoing from the town's festival, Ella ventured deep into the woods. The further she walked, the more she sensed something wasn't right. The air grew heavy with an unsettling feeling, and the normal rustling of leaves was replaced by a menacing, eerie silence. Moonlight barely penetrated the thick trees, and her flashlight struggled to pierce the shadows. It was as if the woods themselves were alive, watching her. Suddenly she heard the faint sounds of chanting. Following the noise, she stumbled upon a hidden clearing where several hooded figures stood in a circle. At the center, an altar draped in crimson cloth, surrounded by old Halloween decorations that seemed disturbingly out of place in the darkness. A large, disfigured statue stood over the altar, a grotesque figure of a twisted entity, half human, half beast, staring down at the hooded cultists. Ella's heart pounded. The chanting grew louder, and she quickly ducked behind a tree, camera recording everything. The scene felt like something out of one of those dark web horror stories, or a scary movie reaction she'd seen, but this was real. The figures raised their hands towards the statue, chanting in a language she couldn't understand. The atmosphere shifted from unsettling to horrifying, as the disfigured entity seemed to come alive, the air vibrating with an unnatural energy. One of the cultists, a tall man with a deep voice, began reciting an incantation, calling forth their ancient spirit. It was then that Ella realized what was about to happen: a sacrifice. The cult was reenacting one of the infamous Halloween sacrifices from decades ago, hoping to summon the entity for real this time. She had heard stories of people disappearing on Halloween, their names whispered in scary Reddit horror stories and true horror tales that never had a happy ending. Her breath caught when a young woman was dragged to the altar, struggling against her captors. The look of terror in the woman's eyes froze Ella in place. She wanted to help, but she was no match for the cult. Panic surged through her body as the ceremony continued. The chants reached a fevered pitch, and the disfigured entity's statue began to glow, an eerie green light illuminating the scene. Sacrifice was moments away. Ella had to act. She grabbed her phone and quickly texted a friend from Ghost Adventures, hoping someone could intervene, but she knew help wouldn't arrive in time. With trembling hands, she aimed her camera at the altar, recording every detail. This evidence would expose the cult to the world. Suddenly, the cultists stopped chanting, and the lead figure turned to where Ella was hiding. "We have a witness," snarled. The cultists advanced, their eyes glowing with dark magic. Ella's heart raced as she scrambled to escape, crashing through the underbrush with the cult close behind. Just as they reached her, a loud crack of thunder echoed through the woods. The sky opened up, and a torrential downpour began. The cultists faltered, their power seemingly weakened by the storm. Ella used the opportunity to run, her legs burning as she sprinted towards the safety of the town. Breathless and soaked, she finally made it back to civilization. She collapsed near the Halloween party, the eerie sounds of the Halloween soundtrack playing softly in the background. The terrifying scene from the woods replayed in her mind. She had the footage. The world would know about the cult and their terrifying Halloween revenge. But as she looked over the video, her blood ran cold. Camera had captured everything except the disfigured entity and the glowing altar. It was as if the creature didn't exist, as if the cult's powers had erased their dark magic from the film. All that remained were shadows, chants, and the terror etched on her face. The people of Black Hollow would never know the truth, but Ella did. The cult still operated in the shadows, their sacrifices continuing each Halloween. And next year, she feared they'd come for her. The second story is about the ritual of the blood moon. On the night of the blood moon, a sinister cult gathered deep in the forest, hidden from the world. Their goal, to complete a ritual sacrifice that would invoke ancient cosmic horrors. The group believed in the dark power of a Halloween witch, an entity older than time itself, whose curse they hoped to summon through bloodshed. Max had always been intrigued by true scary stories, but when he stumbled upon dark web horror stories about cult sacrifices under the blood moon, he couldn't resist investigating. Armed with his camera and a playlist of spooky Halloween music, he set off into the forest, determined to capture the truth. The deeper Max ventured into the woods, the darker the path became. He remembered the analog horror stories he had seen, how something simple like a walk could turn into a paranormal nightmare. As he neared the clearing, he could hear eerie chanting, the kind of sound that makes the hair on the back of your neck stand up. Max crept closer, hiding behind a tree as he saw the cultists gathered around a massive stone altar. The flickering firelight revealed strange symbols and Halloween decorations that seemed out of place. The figure at the center, a Halloween witch, was covered in dark robes, her face hidden beneath a hood. She began the ritual, raising a dagger as the cultists chanted louder. Max's heart raced. This wasn't just a scary Reddit story, it was happening. He fumbled with his camera, hoping to record what was unfolding. But as soon as he clicked record, the witch turned, locking eyes with him. Her face was disfigured, twisted by unnatural forces, just like the stories of cult sacrifices he'd read. Suddenly the air grew thick with a big, scary presence. The temperature dropped and a horrific, ambient hum filled the air. Max's fear intensified as the witch raised her arms, summoning something from beyond. The cosmic horror they worshipped began to manifest, grotesque, otherworldly figure emerging from the shadows. Max could hear distant whispers, the ghostly remnants of previous sacrifices, and he realized this was a paranormal nightmare beyond comprehension. He needed to escape. As he tried to run, the cultists surrounded him, blocking every path. One grabbed his arm, forcing him toward the altar, where the witch waited, dagger in hand. In the distance, the eerie sounds of Halloween kills could be heard, like a distant Halloween party turned dark. Max struggled, the cultists' grip tightening as they prepared to offer him as the next sacrifice. In his final moments, Max could feel the weight of true horror stories bearing down on him. This was no Reddit horror fantasy. This was real. As the dagger descended, his camera captured the last image, the disfigured entity fully formed, standing behind the witch, waiting for its offering. The third story is about the Hollowed One. In the small town of Hollow Creek, Halloween wasn't just a night for fun and costumes. It was a time of terror. Every year as the moon rose high, the Hollowed Ones, a mysterious cult, would emerge from the shadows, performing gruesome cult sacrifices to summon their disfigured entity. The town's dark history was buried deep. Some knew the truth, especially those who never made it out alive. Mark was a paranormal investigator from Twin Paranormal, known for seeking out terrifying true horror stories. He had heard rumors of the Hollowed Ones, a cult that worshipped an ancient Halloween witch whose power grew each Halloween. Determined to uncover the truth, Mark ventured into the woods with his camera, gear, and a Halloween soundtrack playing softly in his ears. As he neared the Hollowed One's hideout, a strange, unsettling feeling washed over him. The air grew heavy with a horror ambient hum, and the spooky Halloween music from town seemed to fade into the background. Mark's heart pounded as he entered the clearing, where the cult stood in a circle around a fire. Their faces were hidden beneath dark hoods, but Mark could feel their eyes on him. Suddenly, the leader of the cult raised a gnarled hand toward the sky. Mark watched in horror as a disfigured entity began to emerge from the shadows, a grotesque figure, twisted and deformed, summoned by the cult's sacrifice. It looked like something from a cosmic horror movie, too unreal and horrifying to comprehend. The chants grew louder. filling the air with a scary ambience that made Mark's skin crawl. This was no ordinary ghost story or Halloween legend. It was the real deal, a paranormal nightmare brought to life. He knew he needed to capture this moment on camera, but as he raised his device, cultists turned toward him. Before Mark could react, the leader whispered an incantation, and the disfigured entity lunged at him. Mark stumbled backward, his heart racing as he tried to escape. The creature's twisted form loomed over him, its hollow eyes filled with malice. He had seen scary Reddit stories about this, but now he was living one. Mark screamed, hoping someone would hear. The cult's ritual was unstoppable. The disfigured entity moved closer, its gnarled hands reaching out. In the background, the faint sound of Halloween kills played, a sinister reminder of the town's haunted past. As the entity grabbed Mark, he realized this was his end. In his final moments, Mark understood the terrifying reality. The Hallowed Ones had completed their ritual, and he was their final sacrifice. The disfigured entity claimed him, vanishing into the shadows, leaving only the firelight and the chilling silence of the woods behind. The fourth story is the Offering of Shadows. In the desolate outskirts of Raven's Peak, an eerie silence hung in the air every Halloween. The town had long abandoned its annual celebration, for lurking in the shadows was an ancient cult known for their gruesome cult sacrifices. These sacrifices weren't just tales from scary Reddit stories. They were real, and they involved the offering of innocent souls to a disfigured entity that haunted the town's dark history. For years, ghost hunters and paranormal investigators, including the famous Ghost Adventures crew, had attempted to uncover the truth behind the disappearance. This year, it was David's turn. A passionate investigator from Twin Paranormal, David was obsessed with true scary stories and had heard the rumors about the terrifying rituals held at an old, decaying manor deep in the woods. As Halloween night approached, David made his way toward the manor, his heart racing with both fear and excitement. He could hear the distant echoes of spooky Halloween music from town, but in the woods, the silence was suffocating. Halloween decorations from decades past, now rotted and tattered, adorned the trees along the path. A big, scary atmosphere surrounded him as he ventured deeper into the forest. The manor came into view, and a wave of dread washed over David. He could feel the oppressive, horror ambient presence in the air, like something watching him from the shadows. He remembered the stories of the disfigured entity, a creature twisted by cosmic horror, summoned by the cult to exact their ancient rituals. The house itself felt alive, pulsing with dark energy. David entered the manor, the old wooden doors creaking loudly behind him. Inside, the scene was just as the rumors described, an altar surrounded by ancient symbols and rotting Halloween decoration. As he stepped closer, he saw something that made his blood run cold. A group of hooded figures standing in a circle, chanting in a language he didn't recognize. At the center of the altar stood the disfigured entity, its twisted form barely visible in the dim light. It resembled something from an analog horror movie, its limbs unnaturally long and its face contorted beyond recognition. The chanting grew louder, and the entity turned toward David, sensing his presence. Panic set in. He had stumbled right into the middle of a paranormal nightmare, where true horror stories came to life. He scrambled to pull out his camera, hoping to document the scene, but the cultists turned their attention toward him, chanting faster as the entity began to move. David tried to run. The heavy, scary ambience weighed him down. The disfigured entity lunged at him with terrifying speed. As it reached him, David's scream echoed through the manor, drowned out by the sinister chanting. He was the next offering, claimed by the cult's ancient ritual. The manor fell silent, and Raven's Peak would once again whisper of the shadows that claimed another victim. Fifth and final story is about the sacrifice of the Red Moon. In the isolated village of Alderton, the Red Moon was feared. Every Halloween, under its crimson glow, a secret cult gathered for their horrifying cult sacrifices. The townspeople whispered of true horror stories passed down through generations, stories of a disfigured entity summoned by the blood spilled on Halloween night. These weren't just legends, they were dark web horror stories come to life. Rebecca, a journalist obsessed with uncovering the truth behind paranormal stories, had heard the rumors of the Red Moon sacrifice. Determined to expose the cult, she joined the Ghost Adventures team and ventured to Alderton on Halloween night. Armed with her camera and a Halloween soundtrack playing softly in her ear, she made her way toward the cult's secret gathering place deep in the forest. As she approached, the forest became unnaturally quiet, the air heavy with scary ambience. The distant sounds of spooky Halloween music from the village faded, replaced by a sinister silence. Rebecca's heart pounded as she reached a clearing, where hooded figures stood in a circle, chanting under the glow of the red moon. At the center of the circle was an altar, adorned with Halloween decorations that seemed grotesquely out of place in the dark ritual. Above it, the disfigured entity loomed, its twisted, otherworldly form barely visible in the shadows. Rebecca had read Reddit horror stories about such entities. Seeing one in person was a nightmare beyond comprehension. The creature was a product of cosmic horror, being summoned from the darkest corners of existence. As the cultists chanted, Rebecca realized they were preparing for a new sacrifice. A young man, bound and gagged, lay on the altar, his eyes wide with terror. The cult's leader, figure shrouded in black, raised a dagger high, ready to spill blood for their ancient Halloween witch. Rebecca's instincts kicked in. She quickly pulled out her camera, hoping to document the scene. But as soon as she pressed record, the disfigured entity turned its attention to her. The chanting stopped, and the leader pointed directly at her, whispering an incantation. Suddenly, the air grew colder, and the entity moved toward her with terrifying speed. Rebecca's breath caught in her throat as she realized she had walked into a paranormal nightmare. The big, scary presence of the creature overwhelmed her, its hollow eyes staring into her soul. She tried to run, but her legs felt like lead. The cultists closed in, their chants growing louder as the entity's power grew. In the distance, the faint sound of Halloween kills echoed, a reminder that the ritual had claimed victims before, and she was next. Rebecca's final scream was drowned out by the chanting. The disfigured entity reached her, and everything went dark. The red moon had claimed another soul. And there you have it. 5 terrifying tales of cult sacrifices under the blood-red moon of Halloween. From ancient rituals to disfigured entities, these stories remind us that some legends aren't just fiction. They're horrifying realities lurking in the shadows. If you enjoyed these spine-chilling stories, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more nightmare-inducing content. Let me know in the comments which story gave you the most chills, or if you've ever heard of any creepy cult legends yourself. Remember, Halloween isn't just a night for fun, it's a night when dark forces gather. So stay safe, stay cautious, and most importantly, stay away from the shadows. Until next time, keep your lights on and your doors locked, because you never know who or what might be watching. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Happy Halloween.